There are those people, those blessed people that we've been privileged to meet during our lives, who have also opened doors for us. We come from different places, different languages, different cultures. Here's Fouad from Morocco. He grew up in an environment quite different from me in Southern California. I see our friends from Spain here. They also grew up in an environment quite different from Morocco or Southern California. And yet, I think there's something that connects us, which is that perhaps somewhere along the line, we found in our hearts the need or the aspiration to search for some sort of meaning. Why we're here? What are we doing here? What are we supposed to be doing? And how do all these pieces fit together? And so if I see this question of books and opening doors, there are these people, these blessed people. You want to call them shuyukh or teachers, whatever word you think is better, to whom Allah has given the keys to understanding what we're doing here, and also the strength and I guess you could say courage to transmit some of that to other people. And that's purely by the grace of Allah. So if we want to talk about two books tonight, it's in that context. That there are two books that came from people who were given that gift to transmit some of the keys for us to understand what we're doing here, and also the interior dimension of our religion, if you're a Muslim. And in that context, both of these books that we're going to talk about tonight, the new translation of the Diwan of Muhammad al-Habib that we worked on for 6 years, and who passed away in 1972, and the letters of the Sheikh ad-Darqawi, who lived in the latter half of the 1700s and into the early 1800s. These books are connected by the same thing, that they're expressing essential truths of the Sufic way. You could call it the Sufic way if you want. This is above and beyond any question of tariqah or affiliation, whether it's Darqawi, Qadiri, or Khalvati, or Naqshbandi. These are beyond that sort of question. They're the essential teachings of the way. One is expressed in letters, written from a place in the mountains of northeast Morocco, sent to disciples throughout the country. And the other, 150 years later, is expressed. The same things are expressed, but in beautiful songs, poetry. This has one approach, and this has another approach, but what's expressed in both of them is the same. So what we'd like to do in just a few minutes, and we don't want to make this very long, and we hope there's time for questions and discussion at the end and comments, is to start with start in reverse with the Diwan, which was the first project that we worked on, with Orgiva and Sidi Abdul Latif, and what is now the Kutubía Center. And then move on to the letters and a little bit of something about the background, what's different about this, perhaps, and then finish with a couple of excerpts from each work. We'll read a couple of excerpts, and then if there are questions that arise or comments that you have, hopefully there'll be time for that. Or if during the talk, during our presentation, something arises, I say something that's not clear, or Fouad says something that's not quite clear, please stop us and ask. I would rather make this a dialogue rather than what is it? A monologue. And in respect to the Diwan, here's how I'd like to start. I'd like to share with you our connection personally to this book. And we're talking about the Arabic version of this before that, before talking about the English. And since Sidi Fouad was connected to this before I was, and he's the first visit to Andalus, and you probably know something about my story, I'd like him to maybe say a few words about himself and how the door was opened for him to the path and also to the Diwan. So, Sidi, Bismillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa sallallahu sallam wa baraka ala sayyidina wa mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima. Bismillah ma sha Allah la yasuqu al-khayra illa Allah. Bismillah ma sha Allah la yasrifu as-su'a illa Allah. Bismillah ma sha Allah ma bikum min ni'matin fa min Allah. Bismillah ma sha Allah la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Thank you, Sidi Rahman, for introducing me to start talking about myself.
Bismillah.
And just to tell you, I'm not an example, but I want just to share with you what happened to me and what's led me to this tariq and to Sufism. Briefly, I was a guy that grew up in a Berber and knowledgeable and family full of scholars. No connection actually to Sufism. In that time, I went to the university, exactly in university, and you know, in university in Morocco there is a lot of people, atheists, socialists, Islamic movement, Salafis people.
What year was this? What year was it?
Huh?
What year was it?
1996.
96.
This is the last year I was in the university, and you know, a guy in 24 years old, in all this mixed thoughts and ideas. But to tell you the truth, no one touched my heart, and no one tell me what is real Islam. Even if I'm Muslim, alhamdulillah. Until one day before the end of the year, and we start preparing for exams, the university arranged for a trip to a waterfall in the suburbs of Marrakesh, a little village, call it Azila, Shalalat Uzud, yeah. In that time, I was with my friends, you know, as I told you, the teenagers, almost teenagers, where people they're
actually, I think they're 20-year-olds, not teenagers.
Yeah.
If you're in the last,
not teenagers.
If you're in the last year of university, I don't think you're a teenager anymore.
24 years. But people, they are very energetic, a little powerful, and want to talk a lot, running, singing. In a time that there is a car come, and there is a guy get out of the car. Is an old man with the jalaba and with the subha, but bigger than this one, or bigger like this, and with the beard, white beard, and dark skin. And what that?
Do you have the picture? It's about a 20-year-old college students, boys and girls, blue jeans, the whole. This is modern Morocco, and suddenly this man gets out of the car in a jalaba and a big subha.
And that's everyone is asking what this man did here, what he's doing here. This and he's with my friend of mine. His name Abdur. In that time is Abdullah. came to me. He wanted just to run away from him because he's talking to him. I doesn't want to be with him for a long time. And he came to me and he said, Fouad, I want you to introduce you a man. He's a good man, and I think they're going to benefit from him. You are, Bismillah. And he put me together with him, and he just ran away.
He disappeared.
That man, just to tell you the truth, and when I started talking to him, I didn't feel any difference between me and him. I mean the age. When he started talking to me, it's like to talk to my friend in my age. He's talking about future, about life, about studying, about everything. But at the end of my talk, before they call us to have lunch, little snack, I start talking to him that this is my last year, and that means no future for me because I have Islamic studies. What gonna do? I'm gonna do after I get my BA. What's the horizons? We can say horizons in this. Okay. What's
future? The
futures? And he told me this, and this is the turning point for me. Wallahi, he said, Fouad, I'm gonna tell you something before you go. You know this universe and this world. It's like a big lock. Yeah, you can't unlock it. What you need to open it. If you open it, everything is going to be serving you and helping you, and you feel that you are. And he said, I told him, lock, he needs a key. I said yes, but the problem that key, when you put it in that little hole, it's go into, but it's not. It won't open. What it need? I told him I don't know. He said every key there is a teeth in it.
Yeah.
You know what does it mean? The key? I told him no. He said dhikrullah. And he said, you know what's the teeth of the dhikr? I told him no. He said as-salatu ala rasulillah. As-salatu ala nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You can make dhikr, but if you didn't gather it with salah al nabi, you miss something. That key won't open. And that man, that time, this is the last time I see him until the end. We left and we returned back to Marrakesh, and we start studying. I forget anything about him. I forget about Salah. Yes.
For those who maybe don't know the word dhikr, what is dhikr?
Remember of Allah, invocation. The dhikr is the invocation and remembering Allah. For example, La ilaha illallah, subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim, alhamdulillah wa shukrulillah, and many kinds of dhikr. So, Salah al-Nabi is dhikr, yeah.
Translate.
Allah, what's the?
Invoking blessings on the Prophet.
Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he said, because Sayyid Hamza, when he stopped me, he reminded me of something. He said, if you make that teeth, if you make Salah al Nabi, that key is passe-partout in French. He said passe-partout.
Master key.
A master key. You can open every master key. Yeah. So he said, make Salah al Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the doors of the world is going to be open for you. And I just forget, 24 years old, I turn back to my books and my studies, and I forget. Before the exams, almost 15 or 20 days, I was with my friends, the old friend that he put me together with him, and they flee. It's that Sidi Abdul Hamid Zimri rahimahullah, he started knocking the door of that house. I don't know how he knows that house, how he knows that we are inside, I don't know. But he knocks the door, and Sidi Abdullah, he opened the window, and they see him down. He say, the crazy guy inside. Do you want me to make him up? I told him yes. And he get up to us, and he start talking to us briefly and making dua for us. And he said, Fouad, and Sidi Abdullah, I want to give you a special salah al Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Just memorize it and say it, and you're gonna see. And he said in that time, I'm going to say it in Arabic, and if my
We'll try
brother
to
Sayyid
translate.
Rahman is translating
Okay,
it,
everybody
please.
will translate.
Allahumma salli ala Sayyid. He said, say, and it has my pen in my hand. He said, say, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi salatan tukhrijuna biha min dhulumati al-wahm wa tukrimuni bi nur al-fath wa tuwaddiha li ma ashkala hatta yufham fa innaka ta'lam wa la a'lam wa anta 'allamul ghuyub. So,
What does that mean?
Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi.
Oh Allah, bless our beloved Master Muhammad
Sallallahu
and his family
salatan tukhrijuni biha min dhulumati al-wahm.
with a blessing that brings us out of the shadows and darkness of illusion
وتكرمني بنور الفتح
and honors me with the light of opening
وتكرمني بنور وتوضح لي ما أشكل حتى يفهم
and makes clear to me what was confused so that I can understand it.
فإنك تعلم ولا أعلم وأنت علام الغيوب.
And you, O Allah, you know and I don't know. And you, وأنت علام الغيوب.
وأنت علام
And
الغيوب.
you're the knower of the unseen.
So this is the Salah Nabi that I got from this man. And he disappeared again. He went out, and once, wallahi, I swear to God, once I wrote it in my book, it's stuck in my mind like if there is a code. It's go here and here. I started memorize it I'm driving my bike, and I'm eating, and somehow something touch it goes into my heart, and I start saying this Salah Nabi every time, everywhere, anytime. So subhanallah, after that alhamdulillah, after I finish my studies, my exams, I succeed alhamdulillah. And by the way, my friend Abdullah, he didn't accept it and he failed. It's not connected, but this is not something that I used to make a joke with him. He said, you didn't accept that Salah Nabi. So I subhanallah, when I finished my exams, I started looking for this man. Wallahi, I felt that I have to meet this man. What's that? What's this? I didn't talk to him a lot, but something it attracted me to this man. I looked for him until I found him. I went to his house, and in my way up to his house, this is the first time that I heard a singing of the qasaid of Sidi Muhammad in this Diwan. The first time in my life, I've never heard this singing or those melodies and tones of those qasaid. And I want to share with you that sound that actually, when I heard it and sit with him for takriban 30 minutes, I heard in some 3 people or 4 people singing it, that again, the same, but this time I heard that voice in my heart everywhere. I dreamed about it until I get up from my dreams and say, what's this? It's something strange. But from that time till he passed away, rahimahullah, in 2002, I never missed a meeting with him for 5 years, day and night, sometimes till 2 after midnight, rahimahullah. And he's living with us in that time in Marrakesh. He traveled to back to Azro, his real land, for 1 year, and he passed away by an accident, rahimahullah. So Sandy said that qasida is لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله قربان من الله عفوي عليك بذكر الله في السر والجهر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله رسول الله
صلى الله عليه
صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله. And pass it to Sayyid Rahman
Barakallahu
to
fiqh.
finish.
I think we're finished.
Astaghfirullah.
That's it. I mean, that's the person who opened the door for him when he's a young, sort of confused college student. If I can say that, because I was one too. I came. My intersection with Fouad was actually through Hamza, or Hamza here, and my intersection with Hamza was through Abdul Hayy and Sayyidah Latifa. When they came to Morocco to study Arabic, and they brought their young, handsome, I can say that, it's okay, son with them. And he was sort of getting footing in Islam. Anyway, eventually, thanks to Hamza and to Usama Cannon, may God give him strength and health and have lutf in whatever he faces, because he's, as some of you know, he's facing a fairly major illness. And they came in contact with this tariqah, and through them I met these guys who were meeting in Marrakesh on Saturday nights. About 8 people, sometimes 5, sometimes 3. Very, very small gathering. And they were reading the Diwan, and they were reading the Weird from really bad photocopies that were made from a book that was published in Casablanca by Haj Muttaqi, who was one of the muqaddim of the tariqah. And because I'm not that good at, at the time I was not that good at reading Arabic, and bad photocopies weren't helping, I decided, I can type in Arabic, so I typed them in Arabic. I typed the Weird, the Litany in Arabic. That was the beginning. And so we had a few pages. This is, 99? Almost.
Early 2000.
Yeah. And so we did that. And there were also people who didn't read Arabic, who didn't speak Arabic or read it or understand it, who were coming to these gatherings eventually. And there's the question that arises, again, about opening a door. I talked to Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad, who is a wonderful person who I love very dearly. And he said something like, well, if people can't read Arabic, they obviously they can't read these qasidas, and they should learn Arabic first. In Morocco, it's hard to say to somebody who comes, either sit quietly in the corner of the gathering, or come back in 15 years when you have enough Arabic to understand what's in here. So we had the idea of starting to make translation and transliteration. And that was the first version of the Diwan. Somehow around 2009, I don't know how it happened, but Sidi Abdul Latif said, "Can you send us a page of that Word document of that translation and transliteration?" I don't know why you were asking, but you did ask. I don't. Anyway, we sent it to him, and in about a week or 2 weeks, I can't remember exactly, he sent us back a beautifully done little booklet, a PDF with a nice cover and everything arranged very beautifully on the page. So we had a booklet suddenly with us that we could give to people that came that couldn't read the Arabic. That was the first Diwan in 2009. Also, by that time, Hamza had come back from the States, and in the interim, and everything gets a little blurred for me, but he'd gotten married to my daughter. And that's our connection. which makes me an in-law of Orgiva, maybe. Or you're an honorary Orgivian, right? And I have some connection to that. So that was sort of the beginning, 2009. This book was was published in 2015. So you see that it was a 6-year process, back and forth, consultation, asking about this word, asking about that word, and then alhamdulillah, it appeared. In the meantime, I want to share something personal with you as well. And that's that in this period of time at the beginning, I had experience with tariqah. I'd had an experience with a tariqah. At one point, it was very good, and it was very opening and very enlightening. And then at another point, it ceased to be good, and I left it. And it ceased to be good not because of the teachings, and not because of the people, but because of the people. the human element suddenly overwhelmed the teachings, and I really couldn't handle it. So I was in a period there of just doing what I could, but Allahu Akbar. When I met Fouad, eventually we were gathering with that early sheets of the weird, and I said, Sidi Fouad, I'd like to formally get permission to say this. He could have given it to me. I didn't know that at the time. But he was made a muqaddam of the tariqah at that time. But he said, well, we're going to go to Meknes. This is my personal story. We met a man there who was a beautiful human being and a person of light, Moulay Hashim al-Balghiti. And we went to his beautiful house in the old Medina of Meknes. Remember? And he, the tea and everything and the cookies and all the things that are necessary. And I was saying to Fouad, he knows why we're here, doesn't he? I'm a Westerner, and I'm sometimes in a hurry for things. And Moulay Hashim heard that, or Fouad told him what he said. And Moulay Hashim did this. Just take it easy. I remember that very clearly. We slept the night in one of those long rooms, and we got up in the morning for the subh. We prayed the subh with him, and we said the weird with him. And then he said to us, come and sit down in front of me. And he took his right hand and my right hand between his hands, and he transmitted the weird. He recited Surah Al-Fatiha. And what else?
صلاة الفاتح اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد
فاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق. That somebody asked me, how have you managed to work together? We worked together after that on 6 translations, and with good harmony. And I said, apart from what happened then, 15 years ago in that room in Meknes, I can't say anything else. That's all. But alhamdulillah. We've been very close and good friends, and we've also gone through some happiness and also some very difficult times as well. Labud. So that was the next step. The last question that you could maybe ask about this Diwan, the history of this Diwan in English, is why do it? And it goes back to the initial thing that we said at the beginning about opening doors. The Diwan in Arabic is good if you can read Arabic. The previous translations, there was a previous translation of the Diwan. It wasn't exactly accessible, and in some cases, with all due respect and love to the person who translated it, and may God reward her and bless her, there were things that missed the mark. And so certain things didn't quite make sense. Inshallah, there'll be people down the line who say, by the way, we found lots of things that we don't like in this, and we'd like to make a new translation. Allahu alam, Allahu alam. But that's what we worked at, is putting this into a book that's quite accessible. And the way Sidi Abdul Latif put this on the page, where I can actually find a qasida very easily, and then it's in Arabic, and transliteration in English is, I think, quite a work of art. That's the Diwan. And if there's any questions along the way, we could answer them now or just proceed. Sidi? Yes, Sidi.
This, I have a copy of this, Diwan of yours. It's wonderful. The text is wonderful. The translation is also wonderful. But it is poetry and it's song, and it's meant to be sung.
Yeah.
But we don't have a CD or a tape or a way to bring this text and make it work. What do you have to say
about it? After the translation, it just leaves my hands, but I think it's a beautiful suggestion, and although some of the things I think Abdul Latif knows better than I. There's recordings of the litany of the wird now you could, online, and you can and some of the qasidas, I think, and
even wird is now an application now.
Yeah.
They're online. They're online?
You can find those stuff.
Excuse me. Rahman.
Well, excuse
To
me.
add to that,
He hasn't finished. He hasn't answered my question.
No,
To add to that,
I think Sidi Abdul Razak has a good point.
It holds by itself without the music, because the teachings are in the music. The music is Moroccan, so it actually doesn't sing in my heart, but the text itself is the teachings of the teacher.
I said
That is without the music, it's amazing. Thank you very much for translating.
Yeah, Sidi.
Can I just interject here?
Yes.
I have a blog which has a recording I made in the 1970s of all the tunes of most of the Diwan. It's just a couple of verses of each tune. I could give it to you afterwards. It was done on a cassette, and it's accessible online. And you can also hear. Well, you're right. We could do a CD of all the tunes, but it's better to sit with people who know the tunes. I mean, mea culpa. It's my fault. I should have been singing more. But
The people who know are not available.
We're working on that.
People who know.
We're working on that. Fouad says we're. Fouad said we're working on that in Marrakesh. They have some people with voices, not me. The last thing I want to say about this effort. Alhamdulillah, it's a collaborative effort. Fouad and I collaborated. We also had the son of Moulay Hashim who was living in Marrakesh at the time and knows the history of all these things. If we had questions about it, we would ask him. There's something else. Our friend Hamza, he also contributed. This is noted in the Diwan. What he contributed. And maybe more deeply touching to me is our friend and brother Abdul Haymor. He contributed to this effort, and he said, I think to Sidi Abdul Latif, this is after he had been diagnosed with cancer. and he was looking at the end pretty near. But he said, Sidi, I think Allah is keeping me alive so I can see this new Diwan born. He passed away. The Diwan came out in 2015. I think he received a copy before that, or a PDF at least, from Sidi Harun, and he passed away in spring of 2016. Rahimahullah. And his beautiful words are here as well, and they're noted in the footnotes of the Diwan. So it was a collaborative effort between a lot of people, and I think that's to its credit. I want to move on to this. This is hopefully will be a little more brief than this. Ever since my wife Jamila, who's not here but loves Orgiva, we became Muslims, and we became interested in Sufism. There were two books which formed our notions, our core notions about what the path was. One was the Hikam, and we never exhaust what's in the Hikam. And the other was a very early translation of some excerpts of these letters done by Titus Burckhardt, and translated from French into English by Martin Lings, Sidi Abu Bakr Siraj Din. It was a 37-page booklet. And those became reference points for us. Before we were very involved in Sufism or anything like that. And so after we completed the Diwan, and it was published with the help and generosity of Sidi Abdul Latif, we looked at the letters. It's a long story which I won't get into, but I somehow was given a digital copy of all the letters, typed out, from a handwritten copy from a lithograph that was copied by hand by the son of Rahman Tlemceni, who became the teacher of our friends in Madrid, Sidi Yahya and Sidi Idris, and those people in the Tariqa Alawiyah. The letters, prior to fairly recently, were a closed thing, very inaccessible. And the most commonly available version in Morocco for years, before the beautiful printing that Sayyidah Aziza has brought for people who are interested in the Arabic, they were available in lithograph. I don't know if you can see very well. This is an offset printing of the lithograph version, which was done in 1917, the lithograph. And this is what it looks like inside.
You can't
Can you
even
say
read
something
it.
about what lithograph is for people who don't know?
Lithograph. Should I mention it? Oh, thank you. It's an interesting process. Everything in the beginning was handwritten. And printing more than one copy in Morocco didn't appear until the 20th century. Printing sacred books couldn't be done because of the process involved in printing. When you print offset, and you have, first of all, movable type, creates a lot of mistakes in Arabic. Since it's at the Kutubía Center, we can talk about books a little. Because of the three different forms of the letter, they can easily get mixed up. That's one thing. So if it's the Quran, there can't be mistakes. If it has verses of the Quran, there can't be mistakes. If it's hadith, there can't be mistakes. So everything was handwritten. And actually in In the letters, there is a letter noted here in the collection where somebody gave Sheikh Moulay al-Arabi a copy of the Dalai al-Khairat written by hand. And they would have, when you finished copying something like that, which could take months, they would have a little, like a birthday party for the book. And
Yeah.
And then the copies, of course, that were made, slowly copied by hand, were very expensive if you wanted to buy one. If you didn't do it yourself, they were expensive. And so the next step, after the turn of the century, the early 20th century, was lithograph in Morocco and other places in the Muslim world. That means you write with a stylus on a piece of rock, litho, it's a piece of flat stone. You write the book, so it's still handwritten, and then you can print with that gently more than one copy.
Do you write a negative?
It's an ink. It's a kind of ink.
Yes.
That's acid, isn't it? Acid.
Yeah.
Yes.
The,
Yeah.
But it's called,
Yes.
it's called not the positive but the negative, so that
Yeah.
the ink.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the process myself, but this is the kind of book that comes out. And all the religious books in Morocco were like this in the early 20th century. And of course, if they find mistakes, they add the correction in the margin. So these books are very inaccessible. I mean, to many
To read it.
many Arabic speakers. And as far as where the letters are, the only way you can tell where one letter stops and begins, I put some numbers in this, and it says somewhere, وَمِنْهَا. And among them, and then it quotes the letter. And at the end of the letter, most of them end with وَالسَّلَامُ. So you can see وَمِنْهَا, and you find وَالسَّلَامُ. And then in between, it's very hard to read. And there may be artifacts in the text that look like diacritical marks. And Sayyidah Aisha, may God bless her, I believe that she was working from this very hard to make out. So the lithograph made copies a little bit less expensive, but it wasn't until offset, a photographic process, that they were affordable. But if you go back, a person who's in a tariqah at that time in Morocco, they would have to choose between buying a lithograph or buying a loaf of bread. And there's probably not much choice there for people. So we were hoping to make this a little bit accessible, and what we did. Fortunately, over a period of time, lithographs, offset print of the letters did appear, and as late as 1999, finally, this beautiful, fairly beautiful collection, it was printed in Abu Dhabi, and it was edited by Bassam Muhammad Baroud. He's not a Moroccan, but he did a good job at editing these. And the other thing that he added to the book, which makes it much more accessible, he put numbers, section numbers, and then he gave each letter a heading that tells you a little bit about what it is. So when we set out to do the letters, we had seen a numbered version of the letters. Even the numbers are a little bit hard to find. We decided to do it following Sidi Baroud, Bassam Muhammad Baroud. And we gave each letter a number, following his number, and we gave each letter a subtitle, a title. We didn't translate the titles that he put in Arabic, but we made titles that would mean something to a Western reader who might want to look through this and find a particular subject discussed. So that was some of the steps. Again, with the same niyyah, with the same intention, which was to open this up and make it more accessible. If anybody wanted to read about what these gifted and blessed teachers had to say, then they would have the chance. Namasidi.
Yes.
These are letters that went around to a community of people, were sent to students.
Yes, thank you for asking that. Sheikh al-Darqawi, radiallahu anh, he lived in the mountains of northeast Morocco. It's the Reef area, the Jibali area, in a place that is, to this day, it's inaccessible for 2 or 3 months of the year. When the rains start and the snow, there's no road, basically. You have to go in a big truck or something like this. But he was born there, and he studied with a teacher in Fez, Sidi Ali Jamal, who opened the door for him and then said, now I want you to go back to your land. And Sheikh al-Darqawi said, but there's nobody there. The way needs companionship. We need companions in the way. And he said, Wuldhum. He said, give birth to them. Give birth to them, he said. And the Sheikh al-Darqawi, of course, recounts this here, and he said it to me as if he saw them already there. You know, and so he did establish a zawiya in those mountains. But how do you communicate with anybody? There are people in Fez that wanted, and people in Tanja, and so he would write letters. And they would be delivered by messengers, probably riding on horses or perhaps mules, walking, and be hand-delivered to people. People slowly began gathering these letters together, and they first came out like this, in a Majmu'at al-Rasail, and then they became more and more widespread until it's said by one of the people that wrote his biography that when he died in 1823, he left 40,000 students. 40,000 students throughout Morocco and into Algeria, all of whom could guide people to God. We had the blessing of going up to his resting place and Zawiya, and we met one of his relatives. And we looked at how today there's practically no cell phone coverage. We looked at how inaccessible it was and asked that relative, he said, how did this happen? Where over that period of his life, 40,000 followers. He said, ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. That's by the blessing of God. That's all. That was by the blessing of God. So those were how the letters started.
Were the letters directed to particular murids or to communities?
Yeah, both. So some of the letters were directed to a particular person, some to a muqaddam in some region, some to a group of people in a particular place. but they're not specific necessarily to a particular place or time, because what they're talking about, and I'll read you an example. And so what else? What else can we say about them?
So did the people actually send out questions to him that he would answer, or would
There-
he just randomly choose?
Yes, there was a correspondence back and forth. And he encouraged those students, those muridin, those students, to write him and stay in touch. And he said, if we have a communication in the world, al-alam al-hissi, al-alam al-hiss, in this sensory world, the world we can see and touch, we also have a connection in our hearts, in our spirits. He explains what that means in the letters. He says, because there comes a point you cease to see this world, the outer world and the inner world, and see them all as one. You follow? I'm going to read just a couple of things that we considered why we went to the translation process. These letters were written 200 years ago, and they're still read in zawiyas in Morocco to this day. Always with a little bit of commentary about whoever reads them, a little explanation, because some of these words people don't understand anymore. These letters speak to every aspect of Sufism, to doctrine, to practice, and also to things that one might, obstacles that one might run into along the way. And the other thing, these letters are personal. The Sheikh, ad-Darqawi, I've never read anything this personal in Sufism. He talks about he talks about his journey, his own journey, but he also talks about he talks about the low points. If you set out on the path, it's not always smooth. And I've never read any Sufic writing, and maybe you have, and let me know, where the Sheikh talks about, this is what happened to me. This was a trial and a tribulation for me, and this is what happened. So he shares that, which is quite rare. And he writes in the first person. As I said, this collection up until, I don't say this version, but it's been fairly inaccessible, so we tried to make it more accessible. And the last point about these letters, and I think it's very relevant to us now, is that they were written in a period in Morocco, which is the mid-1700s, 1750, into the early 1800s, which was a period of change in the whole world. But in Morocco, it was very particular because the Sultan at that time, and all this is discussed in the introduction to the letters, by the way, it's explained. The Sultan Moulay Slimane, he was a person, and you probably met people like this. He was, on one hand, he had some attraction to Sufism, and on the other hand, he had a lot of attraction to literalism and just formalism. And when Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, the founder of Wahhabism, appeared in the Arabian Peninsula, and the Wahhabi movement gained a footing in Arabia, the King Saud wrote a letter to the Arabic-speaking Muslim countries that around there and said, this is what our way, this is what we're calling you to, and so we are the guardians of the shrines. Please consider this. Moulay Slimane sent a delegation to Arabia, and they treated them very well, and they didn't see any problem. And Moulay Slimane came under the spell of Wahhabism. This is the first time Wahhabism appeared in Morocco. And we've been dealing with it, I say we, ever since. And Moulay Slimane sent out a khutbah to be read in all the places in Morocco to stop visiting the shrines and zawiyas, destroy these qubbas that have the noble shurafa, wal ulama, wal awliya. Just destroy them like has been happening for the last I don't know how many years. And come back to the real Islam. Morocco, and I need to put this in. Morocco officially is based on Islam in Morocco is based on three things. And this is derived from the Hadith Jibril. When the Prophet ﷺ met that stranger who nobody knew, and he asked him three questions. Ya Muhammad, akhbarni an Islam. And he said, it's an tashhada, the shahada, the salat. He told him actions. And then he said, and he said, sadaqta. Yeah, you answered correctly, that's right. And the narrator said, we were amazed that somebody that asked a question said, you're right. And then he asked him about iman, and he talked about beliefs. Tu'minu billah wa malaikatihi wa rusulihi wa yawmil akhir. And again he said, sadaqta. And then he said, wa akhbarni an al-ihsan. And he answered him on al-ihsan, which means excellence or perfection, or goodness, or generosity. It can mean a lot of things. And he said, al-ihsan an ta'budu Allah كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. And that you worship God as if you're seeing Him, and if you don't see Him, He sees you. For Morocco, each of those things of the hadith became the crystal, the seed of a science. The first fiqh. How do you do this? How do you pray? How do you fast? The second, aqidah, theology. What does it mean if I say, I believe in Allah? What does that mean? And the third, to worship Allah as if you were seeing Him, it means presence and nearness. And that's the ilm tasawwuf. That's what tasawwuf is about. That we can worship Allah as if we're seeing Him. If you go to the website of the Ministry of Religious Affairs in Morocco, Wizard al-Habus, and you go to the principal page, and you click at the bottom, you'll find Al-Islam fil Maghrib. You click on that little hyperlink, and it'll take you to a page, and it'll say Al-Madhab Maliki, the fiqh, Aqidah al-Ash'ariyah, the theology, at-Tasawwuf, Sufism. That's the official, that's the default Islam in Morocco. And it has been for decades, centuries, I could say. But when the Wahhabi message entered into Morocco, it immediately caused problems for people. The Moulay Slimane wanted to stop the visit of there are 7 saints in Marrakesh, and people would come and make a visit. He said, stop that. The people of Marrakesh rose up against him and said, no, and frankly speaking, it became sort of the beginning of the end for Moulay Slimane as a ruler in Morocco. Yeah. But
how does it relate to
so at the same time, here were the Wahhabis saying, stop visiting these saints Stop visiting these shrines, tear them down, tear down these zawiyas, eliminate. And Sheikh al-Darqawi was writing to his murideen in one of the letters here, which you can find very easily, and he said, there's a great benefit for you to visit the saints, living and dead. Visit them like you would visit your parents, your mother and father, if they were deceased. And he goes on to talk about the benefits. So here we have two ways. In other words, people at that point in history were seeing the Islamic world needs revival somehow. The Wahhabis saw that revival meant destroying anything that had to do with Sufism, basically. And Sheikh al-Darqawi and the movement in the northeast of Morocco saw, and they called this movement ليحيي العباد والبلاد, the Sufic movement which will give new life to the servants of Allah and to the country itself. So they saw this as one movement, and there's another movement. And that conflict continues. So these letters, to some extent, and some of these ideas are mentioned indirectly in the letters, they're the first response to Wahhabism from a traditional standpoint in a Muslim country. Some of them are. So they're quite, I think there's some relevance to today. I think.
Well, I want to say something.
Sidi.
About this, because this reaction from the Wahhabis was not only against the practices of the sober Sufis, but in Morocco there were, and in many other places, there were expressions of so-called Sufis who were absolutely crazy, like the Isawiya and other tariqas that just drove nails to their faces and hit their heads with axes and made all these kinds of bloody mess. So, in a sense, I think that movement against that was very healthy. Against this, I don't know from where these people take their isnads and their authority, but obviously they were crazy. And they're still going on.
This is the word of popular Sufism that becomes distorted as anything. But frankly speaking, if I had a choice between the distortion of the Sufis and the distortion of Daesh, ISIS, I think I would take the Sufis. At any rate, that's a question. That's a huge question, but we don't have time to get into it. But Sheikh al-Darqawi, throughout the letters, he talks about those people as well. And he warns people in the way to avoid extremes and anything that trespasses or goes beyond the Sharia, whatever that might be. There's a letter about that. I want to finish just by reading a passage from here, and then we'll read a passage a little bit from the Diwan. Sidi Abdul Hadi.
Sing it.
Sing.
Yeah.
Sing.
You're right. Sheikh al-Darqawi gave advice for so many different things. This is just a simple letter. It's letter 97. And he said, and the letter we gave the subtitle this. This is the subtitle. It said, a time each day for remembrance. That's all. Make a time each day for remembrance. And he said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I advise you, and he's writing actually to students of knowledge in Fes, this particular letter. He said, I advise you my respected friends, to always make a time for God Most High. And I've used God throughout this translation. And I'll tell you why. Sheikh Omar Abdullah, who I respect and love, I met him once and I said, tell me about translation. He said, if you want to do a translation, translate it so that a little Christian lady, a little old Christian lady in Kansas could find something beautiful in it and maybe even inspiring. So, we use God. Make a time for God Most High, free from any other preoccupations or egoistic purposes. Hudud al-nafs. The nafs shouldn't get anything out of this. At night or by day, during which to recite the word of God, Kalamullah, Kitabullah, or to invoke the formula La ilaha illallah, or the name of God alone, Allah, Allah, or to offer what prayers you are able, or to invoke blessings upon the Messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you can follow this, God will grant you an opening beyond that which He has granted you thus far, and manifest His grace towards you as He has manifested it toward other learned folks like you. Do not be satisfied with the outward knowledge you already have, but rather seek inward knowledge as you seek outward knowledge, and do what is necessary to attain them both. Be among the people of hearts and limbs, not just among the people of limbs. For as the hadith says, God does not look at your forms nor at your bodies. God looks at your hearts. لا ينظرون الله إلى صوركم ولا أجسامكم ولكن ينظرون إلى قلوبكم. And in the book of God Most High, it says, truly it is not the eyes that go blind, but it is hearts within the breast that go blind. And it also says, and they have hearts with which they understand not, and other such verses. And he goes on to say, and pay no attention to those who say, today only the people of the outward are left. But as for those of the inward, that is a community that has passed away. Tilka ummatan qad khalat. This idea has been voiced around a lot by certain scholars, but the situation is not as they think. In fact, it is quite the contrary. But, and we have the benefit of a very beautiful translation of the Burda, which is the second most quoted book of Sufism in these letters, by Sayyidah Aziza. The eye may reject the sun's light when it is inflamed, and when the body is unwell, the mouth may shun even the taste of sweet water. What is beautiful for me in this little passage of the letter, you see how many openings he said, look, if you can't do this, try this. And if you can't do that, try that. I'm not giving you long litanies or long things to do. But the condition here is that you're alone with Allah. And that there's nothing saying that I'm going to get something out of this for my own self. It's nothing that I'm going to say this to somebody else and that they're going to understand or something. It's only for Allah, and it's between you and Allah. قراءة القرآن والصلاة على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أو أذكار أو شهادة أو كل اسم المفرد أو صلاة النوافل. That's one. And what he's talking about, and he brings it out through the letters again and again, is this knowledge that can come to somebody if they have that practice. It's a knowledge, it's as some of you know better than I do, it's called ilm al-mawhub, God-given knowledge. It's not ilm al-maksoob, that you get from studying books formally. And he talks about that a lot throughout the letters. And the Sheikh Sidi Muhammad al-Habib also talks about that in the Qasaid quite a bit. That if you do this and if you take this journey, this kind of knowledge can come to you. Not that that's the intention, but it can come to you. And suddenly we have these awliya, like Sidi Abdulaziz Dabbagh. He was illiterate, and he could answer any question about hadith or Quran or tafsir or anything like this. We have people like Sidi Bu'azza, Abu Ya'za, illiterate mountain person. And he could speak about these things. Sheikh Shadili said, sometimes people ask me a question and I see the answer written on the wall or in the hasira, in the straw mats. I see the answer written there. Sidi Muhammad al-Habib talks about this same idea in a very beautiful way in the Diwan. Sidi, we have that?
Yeah.
And that's how we'd like to end, if it's okay. This is in the qasida that's called the Ta'il al-Kubra. And I'm going to read this in English, what we've tried to translate, and then Sidi Fouad will try to read it in Arabic. These are the lines. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. For if a person truly knew the worth of his heart, he would give all he had without hesitation. And if a person came to know the bliss within his soul, he would shed a tear of joy with every breath he took. He would fly forth from the body that had turned into his cage on wings of meditation to the low tree of the boundary, Sidrat al-Muntaha. And he would range the expanses of the footstool and the throne, where the galaxies appear but a tiny ring. He would see the planets' orbits and the mystery of their houses and the immensity of the speed at which they pass. And the veil of the tablet would be lifted from the mystery it enfolds, and the knowledge it contains would pour forth uncovered, such that were all the trees on earth pens to record it, and the oceans their ink, they would run dry. Bismillah.
I'm gonna sing it. Not until the same.
Yeah, Bismillah.
Oh, okay. With the same.
And then they're going to help you, inshallah.
La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. فلو عرف الإنسان قيمة قلبه لا أنفق كل الكل من غير فترة. لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. ولو أدرك الإنسان لذات سره لا قرن أنفس الخروج بعبرتي. لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. وطرى من الجسم الذي صار قفصه بأجنحة الأفكار منتهى سدرتي. لا أجرموا عنه كحلقتي لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله وشهد أفلك وسر بروجها وشدة إفراط المرور بسرعة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله وزال الحجاب اللوحي عن طيل سره ففحت علوم الكشف من غير سترة لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله فلو كانت الأشجار أقلام كتبها ومدادها البحر المحيط